This is the only scene that's modern day. It's 2015. Local 8th grade class is having an essay contest. And the essay is going to be about history of their hometown. Now, Gracie here has enlisted the help of her grandparents to try to come up with ideas and learn more about the history. So let's sit in and listen to their discussion.
Okay, Grandpa, thanks for bringing me here. I've got a special project at school. And the way you two like history, I just know you can help.
Well, my dear, thank you so much for inviting us. We love to be here as long as we are above the ground.
Now wait a minute there. Now don't forget what George Santayana said in 1905. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yes, Grandpa, and sometimes those of us who know historians are condemned to listen to them repeatedly. Just teasing, but I have a project or essay at school, and, well, it's about New Albany Disasters, so I may need help.
Oh, well, I've got just the perfect thing. Now, when I was your age, everybody always talked about the 1937 flood. Now, even my own mother was in that flood, your great-grandmother. But this town has been plagued by floods since before it even was a town. Now, over there by where the Dairy Queen is on Fallen Run, Josiah Trueblood had a mill. 1812, flood came through, wiped out the dam, and that was the end of that. And even old Daniel Seabrook, way up on the end, while when he was a child, he remembers floods as far back as 1815.
Oh, Grandpa, you're all wet. She needs a hot topic. She needs fire. Well, Dr. Clapp, the friend of the Scribners, neighbor and relative by marriage, organized the very first fire department right here in New Albany in 1818. I'll bet he made himself the chief. The Presbyterians built a church later that year, but before any of those firefighters got trained, that church burned to the ground. Now, Gracie, what do you think about that?
Grandma, don't get all hot and bothered. And anyway, I'm sure Grandpa meant well.
Well, of course. Now, besides, one good flood would douse any of those fires of yours. Besides, the Great Flood of 1832, why, that alone crested at almost 70 feet.
Well, now don't you be forgetting about the Lucy Walker steamboat explosion in 1844 that blew up and sank right down there around Horseshoe. 50 people died. We had a mass funeral of 25 people right here in New Albany. 15 of those people stayed. They're buried here in Fairview Cemetery someplace. The rest we healed up and sent home.
Well, I guess we took care of those out-of-town folks, but 3 years later, flood came through and wiped out the entire covered bridge over Main Street on the way out to Corden Pike. That, well, you know, down there by where Thornton's is almost. Now, how about us poor local folks? How are people supposed to get out of town?
You hold your tongue, old man. You can't forget about the 70 people, 70 prominent people in New Albany. Now, those would be 70 of the best people in New Albany. 70 were aboard the R.J. Lockwood in 1858 on its trial run when the cook stove caught fire. They had to pull that board ashore. They had to get all those people off that boat, and then they stood on the bank and they watched that $100,000 steamboat go up in smoke and sink. Now, Gracie, in today's money, that would be about $2.5 million, and you can take that to the bank.
Grandma, I'm sure you're right, but someone's already doing a write-up on steamboats, and I want to do something a little bit different.
That's right. Think for yourself. Don't listen to her. Listen to me. I'll tell you exactly what you need. Now, she's got 2 measly steamboats. I can give you 3 floods right in a row. 1880s, 1882. We lost hundreds of outhouses in there. 1883, there were 1,000 homes that were lost to damage. 1884, between Silver Creek, Fallen Run, and the Ohio River, New Albany was a cut-off island. You couldn't even gotten under the trestle back here on 8th Street. Even the Chicago Times was making jokes saying,
The Ohio must overcome the habit of rolling out of bed.
See? Make them laugh. They'll remember what you said.
Grandpa, what is it with you and floods? And Grandma, can you listen for a minute?
Now you wait a minute. Fire is no joke. In 1880, the DePaul Woolen Mills, which right over there where New Albany High School sits now, caught fire. There were two girls, Maggie Smith and Anna Poplin, and they needed water in the looming room where they were doing all the weaving. The water boy wasn't around, so they grabbed up the bucket and went to get water. They had just exited the room when the boiler blew up. Maggie was scalded to death right on the spot. Anna was thrown up against the wall and died from her injuries a week later. Gracie, they were only 16 years old. That's the age you're going to be in a few years.
Grandma, Grandpa, I swear, the way you two argue, it's enough to wake the dead. Besides, I already know what I'm doing for my project. I think the worst tragedy of all is when someone dies and no one seems to remember or care about them. What about the children my age or younger who never had a chance? What about the adults? No one knew. Did anyone care about them? Did they suffer? Some of them must have. You see this area behind you? It's called Potter's Field. It's where they bury people you don't know. Well, they don't know anyway. Or poor people who couldn't afford grave sites of their own. Most of the grave marks are unmarked, and they have no story to tell, or none that we know of anyway. Some are listed as found on trail, floated downriver, or German woman found on street. There's also a kid buried here called the streetcar kid. What is a streetcar?
Oh. Well, now that's a street railroad. You see, they drive the track right down through the middle of the street. Well, it ran for 80 years, from right after the Civil War, 1866, to right after World War II, 1846. Those early trolleys, they were pulled along by mules, but halfway in, 1906, if you can imagine, one of the streetcar conductors was Colonel Harlan Sanders himself.
Who's Colonel Sanders?
You've got to be pulling my weight. Colonel Harlan Sanders, born in Henryville, moved to Kentucky, made up a chicken recipe with 11 herbs and spices.
Okay, Grandpa, let me finish the story. Okay, the streetcar kid was a kid who got on a streetcar one day and never came back. No one knew anything else about him. Nobody claimed him. He was buried in an unmarked grave. What happened to his family? Did anyone come looking for him? Why didn't they find him? How many other stories like that are buried here? Like, someone needs to tell these stories. We just can't let them be forgotten. Grandma, don't you think it'd be a disaster if I got on the streetcar one day and never came back?
My dear, it would be an unspeakable tragedy if that happened with you. I am so proud that you have chosen a section of New Albany's history where that story needs to be told.